For 10 years, Marcus worked 2 jobs, prayed every night, and stayed broke. He did everything they ever told him to do, and he was still drowning. Until an old man at his church showed him one simple thing, a jar and a single verse. 100 days later, the grip that had been around his throat for a decade finally began to loosen. What that old man told him is something almost nobody says out loud, and it might be the exact thing you've been waiting to hear. Before we begin, do something for me. Wherever you are right now, whatever bill is sitting in the back of your mind, type one word in the comments that sums up where money has you right now. Stuck, tired, drowning, whatever's true for you. I'm listening. And if you've ever worked hard all month and still come up short, like this video, so it finds the next person who needs it. Here's how it started. Marcus was 34 years old. He was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. He worked days at a warehouse. 3 nights a week, he drove for a delivery app until almost midnight. He had a wife, Tanya, who loved him, and a daughter named Joy, about to turn 7. They lived in a small apartment on the 2nd floor. The hot water ran out halfway through every shower. The rent went up every single year. Here's what you have to understand about Marcus. He was not lazy. He was not faithless. He worked 2 jobs. He prayed. He did everything they ever told him to do. And he was still broke. That was the part that confused him. He'd been taught that if you work hard and you honor God, it works out. So he did both, and the balance never moved. The money came in. Somehow it evaporated before the month was even half over. A car repair, a school fee, a higher light bill. There was always something, and there was never anything left. He carried a credit card. He hadn't been under the balance in 4 years. Every month, he paid the minimum. Every month, the balance was somehow bigger. He felt like a man swimming as hard as he could and going under anyway. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was joy. It was the look on his daughter's face. One Friday in October, Marcus stopped at the store to buy a small cake. Joy's birthday was that weekend. She had asked for one thing, a strawberry cake with her name on it. Just that. He stood at the register with the cake and a pack of candles. He swiped his card. Declined. He swiped it again. Declined. The line behind him went quiet. The cashier gave him that look. And there was Joy, holding his hand, looking up at him. He left the cake on the counter. He walked to his car. He sat there. Something inside him cracked. Not sadness, anger. Not at the bank, not at his boss. At himself, 34 years old, faithful his whole life, working 2 jobs, and he couldn't buy his little girl a birthday cake. He gripped the steering wheel and he said it out loud in the dark of that parking lot. No more. I don't know how, but this ends. Something has to change. That Sunday, Marcus could barely lift his eyes during the service. After the last song, an older man named Earl sat down in the empty chair beside him. Marcus knew Earl the way everyone did. Earl was in his late 60s. He'd run a small hardware store on Main Street for 30 years. He drove a truck older than Marcus. He wore the same 2 jackets all winter. And he owned his house outright. Every time the church needed something quietly covered, a family behind on rent, a kid who needed shoes, somehow it was always Earl. Earl didn't say anything for a minute. Then he said, "I've been where you are, son. I can see it on you. I wore that same face for years." Marcus tried to brush it off. "I'm all right. Just a tight month." Earl smiled, not unkindly. "It's been a tight month for about 10 years, hasn't it?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Can I show you something?" Earl said. "Not a loan. I don't give loans. Something better. The thing that got me out. But only if you actually want it. Because most people would rather complain than change." That week, Marcus sat across from Earl in the back of the hardware store. On the table, Earl set down an old glass jar. Empty. And a worn index card with a single verse on it in faded ink. Earl tapped the card. Proverbs 21:20. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. He looked up. Notice the oil, he said. 3,000 years ago, the wise man kept a jar set aside. The fool swallowed everything he had. Then he asked, Marcus, when your paycheck comes in, what's the first thing that happens to it? Marcus thought. Bills, mostly. Rent, the card, the light bill. Whatever's screaming loudest. And what's left at the end? For you? For your future? Nothing. There's never anything left. Earl nodded slowly. That's the whole problem. Right there. The money comes in, and you hand it to whoever yells the loudest. And the loudest voices are always the bills, the wants, the emergencies. Your future has no voice, so it gets nothing. He leaned forward. Here's the secret nobody taught you. You don't pay your future with what's left over. You pay it first, off the top, before a single bill. He picked up the jar. Starting with your next paycheck, the order changes. Before you pay one bill, before you spend a single dollar, a portion comes off the top and goes in here, even $20. And this jar you do not touch. Not for the light bill, not for the card. This is sacred. You live on what's left. Marcus frowned. But if I take more out first, how do I pay the bills I already can't pay? Earl smiled like he'd been waiting for that question. That's the part that sounds like math and isn't. Think about last month. The money came in, and you spent all of it, down to zero. But if your paycheck had been $20 smaller, you'd have survived. You'd have packed lunch twice instead of buying it. Skipped one drive-through. Waited a week on something you didn't really need. You always find the 20 when it's already gone. So take it off the top before you ever see it. Your spending quietly shrinks to fit what's left. The grocery trip comes in a little tighter. You think twice at the gas station before you grab a soda and a bag of chips. It's the same reason the money vanishes when it's all sitting in your account. It spreads out to fill whatever you let it touch. Take some away first, and the rest falls in line. I've watched it happen 100 times. Earl wrote 3 numbers on the card. $20 a week feels like nothing, he said. But it's a little over $1,000 a year. And $1,000 is the difference between a flat tire being a Tuesday and a flat tire being a disaster. That jar is the reason the next emergency doesn't become the next debt. That's how the slavery ends. Not all at once, little by little. Then he gave Marcus 3 rules. Rule 1. Off the top, always. The moment money comes in, the jar comes first, before you look at a single bill. If you wait until the end, there is no end. Rule 2. The jar is untouchable. You'll be tempted to raid it. A bill will come due, and the jar will be sitting right there. You don't touch it. The second you raid it, it stops being a foundation and goes back to being a wish. Rule 3. The first 100 days will feel impossible. The old bills don't vanish overnight. There will be a month you want to quit and go back to the way it was, even though the way it was drowning. Push through it. After 100 days, something changes that I can't explain to you. You have to feel it. Earl slid the jar across the table. 100 days. Off the top, every paycheck. Then come back and show me. If you actually did it, I'll show you what's next. If you quit, don't waste the trip. The first month was war. Before he paid a single bill, Marcus put $20 in the jar. And then he stared at the bills that were left, and his stomach dropped because it almost didn't fit. Tanya was scared. Marcus, we can't afford to save right now, she said. We can barely afford to live. And he almost agreed with her. One night, a late notice came for the electric bill. The jar sat on the dresser with $40 in it. Marcus stood there a long time, his hand on the lid. $40 would cover the late fee. It would be so easy. He didn't open it. He read the card instead. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. He found the late fee somewhere else. He sold an old tool set he never used, and the jar stayed sealed. And something strange started around week 3. Because the jar took its cut first, Marcus began to see what was left differently. He stopped buying lunch out. Now there was a line he could feel. He paused before the small stuff, the stuff that used to leak out without him even noticing. The boundary did what willpower never could. It made the money visible. Around day 50, the first real test came. Joy's school shoes fell apart. This wasn't a bill he'd let pile up. This was the kind of true emergency the jar was built for. A year ago, that would have gone straight onto the credit card. Another $40 he'd pay interest on for a year. This time, he opened the jar. He paid cash, and he closed it back up. And he stood in that store and almost cried. Because for the first time in his adult life, an emergency had come, and it had not become a debt. It had just been Tuesday. That was the moment he understood what Earl meant. The jar was never about the money in it. It was about who he was becoming. He wasn't a man bracing for the next disaster anymore. He was a man with a foundation under his feet. By month 3, the jar held a few $100s. And for the first time in 4 years, the credit card balance went down instead of up because the emergencies stopped landing on it. On day 100, Marcus walked back into the hardware store and set the jar on the table. Earl looked at it, then looked at Marcus's face, and he smiled. "You did it," he said. "I can see it." Most people never get here. Earl showed him the next step. Once the jar holds 1 full month of expenses, you stop letting it sit in a jar on the dresser. You move it into a high-yield savings account, somewhere it earns a little interest while it waits. And you keep filling it the same way you started, little by little. 1 year later, the credit card was gone. Marcus cut it up at the kitchen table while Joy watched. They had a real emergency fund, 3 months of breathing room, in an account that actually paid interest. They moved to a place where the hot water lasted, and Joy got her bike, the purple one. No candles left on a counter, ever again. But here's the part that tells you Marcus really changed. One Sunday, he noticed a younger man in the back of the church wearing the same face he used to wear, the tight month that had been tight for years. And after the service, Marcus walked over, sat down in the empty chair beside him, and set a small glass jar on the seat between them. He used to think he needed more money. He didn't. He needed an order God wrote down 3,000 years ago that nobody had ever read to him. Store first, live on the rest. The first and the best of what you earn, set aside before the leftovers get devoured. My friend, I told you Marcus's story for one reason. Because it isn't really about Marcus. It's about you. And the change in his life didn't start with a raise. It started with a jar and a decision. And you can make that same decision before you finish this video. Here's what most people miss. The reason you're stuck is almost never how much comes in. It's the order. The leftover strategy fails every single time because there are never any leftovers. The first strategy works every single time because the first always exists. So here is your challenge. The same one Earl gave Marcus. Step 1. Tonight, find a jar or open one separate savings account you promise not to touch. Tonight, not someday. Step 2. This next paycheck, change the order. Before a single bill, before you spend $1, a portion comes off the top into the jar. Even $20. The amount is not the point. The order is the point. Step 3. Don't touch it for 100 days. When the emergency comes, and it will, and the jar is sitting right there, you hold the line. That's the whole test. I promise you this. If you change the order for 100 days, you will not be the same person. The fear that grips you every time the card swipe starts to loosen. Maybe you won't be rich in 100 days, but you'll be free in a way money alone never makes you. Marcus had less than you have. You're watching this, which means you have a way to start tonight. So tell me, drop the words oil jar in the comments right now as your promise that you're starting this paycheck. And tell me the one thing you're putting in your jar this week. Like this video as your commitment and send it to the one person you know who's quietly drowning and too proud to say it. Maybe this is the push they've been praying for. This is Bible assets. God didn't forget your finances, and He hasn't forgotten you. Your future self, the one who isn't afraid anymore, is waiting on the other side of that first jar. Don't make them wait another month.